The colossal warship Zenith cast an ominous shadow over Outpost Epsilon 9, its sleek obsidian hull gleaming under the harsh light of twin suns. As the docking clamps engaged with a resounding clang, the station's inhabitants scurried for cover. They knew what was coming. General Zorknath, Supreme Commander of the Phyrexian Armada, was on a recruitment drive. The airlock hissed open, revealing a towering figure encased in crimson battle armor. Zorknath's four eyes scanned the docking bay, his mandibles clicking in disgust at the motley crew of aliens cowering before him. His voice boomed through the cavernous space, amplified by his suit's speakers. "I seek warriors worthy of the Phyrexian banner. Who among you dares to claim such an honor?" Silence fell over the bay. Then, a small commotion near a stack of cargo containers caught Zorknath's attention. A diminutive figure stumbled forward, struggling under the weight of a large crate. The alien's exoskeleton was dull gray, lacking the vibrant hues of most spacefaring species. Its limbs seemed frail, almost comically so compared to the hulking Phyrexians flanking the general. Zorknath's laughter echoed through the bay. "You there, little one. What manner of creature are you to think yourself fit for battle?" The small alien set down its crate with a grunt, then straightened up to face the general. "Name's John," it said, voice surprisingly steady. "And I reckon I'm as fit as anyone here." The general's amusement grew. Here was a chance for some entertainment, a brief distraction from the tedium of recruitment. He stomped forward, looming over John. "Very well, John. Let us see what you're made of. Lift this." Zorknath gestured to a nearby hover sled loaded with weapon crates. It was easily 10 times John's size, a weight that would challenge even a Phyrexian warrior. John eyed the sled, then shrugged. "All right," he said simply. What happened next would be the subject of whispered conversations throughout the sector for cycles to come. John approached the sled, planted his feet, and gripped the edge. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like straining metal, the sled began to rise. Zorknath's mandibles fell open in shock. The small alien's arms trembled with exertion, but inch by inch, the massive load lifted off the ground. When it was waist-high, John let out a controlled breath and set it back down. "That good enough for ya?" John asked, barely winded. The docking bay erupted in murmurs. Zorknath silenced them with a slash of his clawed hand, his eyes never leaving John. This was impossible. No creature that size should possess such strength. Unless— "What species are you?" the general demanded. John's face was hidden behind a utilitarian breathing mask, common among the station's maintenance workers. His voice betrayed no emotion as he replied, "Does it matter? You're looking for capable warriors. I'd say I fit the bill." Zorknath's mind raced. This small being had managed to surprise him, a feat few had accomplished in his long, bloody career. It was intriguing and potentially useful, but it could also be dangerous. "Very well, John," the general said, injecting as much disdain into the name as possible. "You wish to join the glorious Phyrexian Armada. Then you shall have your chance. But know this, we do not coddle weaklings. The strong survive, the weak perish. This is the way of the universe." John nodded. "Understood, sir. When do we ship out?" The general's eyes narrowed. Was that a hint of amusement in the little alien's voice? No matter. Soon enough, this upstart would learn the true meaning of combat. "Now," Zorknath growled, "gather your belongings. You have 5 units to report to Docking Bay 3. As John hurried off, the general turned to his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vexkar. "Have the new recruit assigned to Gamma Squad, and schedule their training simulation for the next solar rotation. I want to see what this John is truly capable of." Vexkar saluted. "It shall be done, General. But do you truly believe this small one can withstand our training regimens?" Zorknath's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "That remains to be seen. But if nothing else, it should prove entertaining." 12 solar rotations later, John found himself standing in the Zenith's holographic training chamber. Around him, the other members of Gamma Squad, all new recruits from various warrior races, eyed him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. A disembodied voice filled the chamber. Initiating combat simulation. Siege of Karaktor. Difficulty level. Maximum. Survival rate. 12%. The sterile white room shimmered and transformed into a war-torn cityscape. Crumbling buildings stretched toward an ash-filled sky, while the distant sound of explosions echoed through the streets. Tarkun, a hulking bracken with chitinous armor, sneered down at John. "Try not to die too quickly, little one. It reflects poorly on the squad's performance metrics." Before John could reply, a piercing shriek filled the air. Shapes began to materialize from the shadows. Grotesque, multi-limbed creatures with gnashing teeth and razored claws. "Xenomorphs," someone shouted. "Defensive formation." The squad scrambled for cover as a wave of monstrosities surged toward them. Plasma rifles blazed to life, filling the air with sizzling bolts of energy. But for every xenomorph that fell, two more took its place. John found himself separated from the main group, cornered in a bombed-out building. 3 xenomorphs advanced on him, their acid saliva eating through the rubble at their feet. He gripped his rifle tightly, but knew it wouldn't be enough. Then John did something unexpected. He dropped his weapon. The nearest xenomorph lunged, its maw opening to reveal rows of serrated teeth. But instead of cowering, John moved with startling speed. He ducked under the creature's attack, grabbed one of its lower limbs, and used the xenomorph's own momentum to hurl it into its companions. The tangled mass of alien flesh bought John precious seconds. He sprinted to a nearby pile of debris, hefted a chunk of concrete that should have been far too heavy for his small frame, and brought it down on the xenomorphs with bone-crushing force. From across the battlefield, Zorknath watched the fight unfold on a holo display. His eyes narrowed as he observed John's impossible feats of strength and agility. "Interesting," he murmured. "Most interesting indeed." The simulation raged on for hours. Gamma Squad was slowly whittled down, overwhelmed by the relentless xenomorph assault. But John remained, a gray blur of motion amidst the chaos. He seemed to anticipate the aliens' movements, always one step ahead, using the environment, and even the bodies of fallen xenomorphs as weapons. When the simulation finally ended, John stood alone amidst a sea of holographic corpses, both alien and squadmate. His breathing was labored, his simple gray outfit torn and stained with simulated blood. But he was alive. The holo-chamber faded back to its default white state. The door hissed open, revealing General Zorknath himself. The Vrexian commander strode in, his gaze fixed on John. "Impressive," Zorknath said, his tone carefully neutral. "You've survived where all others fell. Perhaps there is more to you than meets the eye, little John." John straightened up, meeting the general's gaze. "Thank you, sir. I aim to exceed expectations." Zorknath's mandibles twitched, the Vrexian equivalent of a frown. "Indeed. But remember this. True warfare is not a simulation. It is brutal, unforgiving, and without glory. We shall see how you fare when the blood and death are real." As the general turned to leave, John spoke up. "With all due respect, sir, I've seen my share of real combat. More than you might think." Zorknath paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. "Is that so? Then enlighten me, recruit. What battles have you fought that could possibly compare to the might of the Vrexian armada?" For a moment, John was silent. Then he reached up and began to unfasten his breathing mask. "That's a long story, General. One I think you'll find very interesting." As the mask fell away, Zorknath's eyes widened in shock. For staring back at him was a face he had only seen in ancient warning broadcasts and classified military reports. A face belonging to a species long thought to be a myth or a long-extinct threat. John smiled, revealing teeth unsuited for any herbivorous species. "Let's talk about Earth, shall we?" The revelation of John's human identity sent shockwaves through the Zenith's command structure. General Zorknath, however, was not one to let surprise cloud his judgment. Instead, he saw an opportunity, a chance to test the limits of this supposedly formidable species. "Very well, human," Zorknath growled, mandibles clicking with barely contained excitement. "You've proven yourself in a simulation. Now, let's see how you fare against my elite warriors." John nodded, his expression unreadable. "Lead the way, General." The combat arena was a massive circular chamber deep within the Zenith's hull. Tiered seating surrounded a central pit filled with various terrains, from craggy rock formations to murky swampland. As John entered, flanked by armed guards, a hush fell over the gathered Phyrexian spectators. Zorknath's voice boomed through hidden speakers. "Today, we witness a trial by fire. This human claims to be a warrior worthy of the Phyrexian armada. He will face 3 of our finest in succession. Should he survive, he may earn a place among us. Should he fall, well, let us say the cleaning drones will be busy." Raucous laughter echoed through the arena. John simply stretched, his lean muscles rippling beneath his nondescript gray outfit. First challenger, Grakthor the Undefeated. A massive Phyrexian, easily twice John's size, leaped into the arena. Grakthor's exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles, and in each of his 4 arms he wielded a wicked-looking blade. "Begin," Zorknath commanded. Grakthor charged, blades whirling in a deadly dance. John stood his ground, waiting until the last possible moment before ducking under the Phyrexian's guard. He rolled, came up behind Grakthor, and delivered a precise strike to a joint in the alien's armor. Grakthor roared in pain and fury, spinning to face his opponent. But John was already moving, using the rocky terrain to stay just out of reach. The human's movements were fluid, almost predatory, as he darted in and out of Grakthor's range. "Stand and fight, puny human," Grakthor bellowed. "If you insist," John replied, his voice eerily calm. What happened next left the audience gasping. John closed the distance in a burst of speed that seemed impossible for his size. He slipped past Grakthor's flailing blades and delivered a series of rapid strikes to key points on the Phyrexian's body. Grakthor's arms went limp, his weapons clattering to the ground. Before the stunned warrior could recover, John had him in a chokehold. "Yield," John said quietly. Grakthor struggled for a moment, then slumped in defeat. "I yield," he gasped. The arena erupted in a mix of cheers and confused murmurs. Zorknath leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. This human was full of surprises. Second challenger, Vexna, mistress of 1,000 poisons. A lithe serpentine alien slithered into the arena, her scales shifting colors to blend with the environment. In her hands, she carried a pair of ornate daggers that glistened with toxic compounds. John eyed his new opponent warily. "I don't suppose we could talk this out?" he asked, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. Vexna's only response was a lightning-fast strike, her dagger barely missing John's throat. The human's reflexes saved him, but not before the blade nicked his arm. Almost immediately, the wound began to swell and discolor. "Careful, little mammal," Vexna hissed. "My blades carry enough toxins to kill a Cronus beast. You'll be dead within minutes." John grimaced, clearly in pain. But instead of panicking, he closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then smiled. "Interesting poison," he said. "Reminds me of a little snake we have back on Earth. Tell me, how long does it usually take to work?" Vexna's confidence faltered. By all rights, the human should have been writhing on the ground by now. Instead, he was advancing on her, his movements steady and purposeful. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse through the swampy portion of the arena. Vexna's camouflage made her nearly invisible, but John seemed to anticipate her attacks, always moving just in time to avoid her strikes. As the battle wore on, it became clear that the poison was affecting John. His movements slowed, sweat beaded on his brow. But he pressed on, his face a mask of determination. Finally, John made his move. He purposely left an opening, and when Vexena lunged to take advantage, he caught her arm. In one smooth motion, he disarmed her and used her own dagger to pin her to the ground. "I believe that's checkmate," John said, his breathing labored. Vexena stared up at him in disbelief. How are you still standing?" John helped her up, then staggered slightly. "Let's just say humans are full of surprises. Now, if you don't mind, I could use an antidote." As medics rushed to treat both combatants, the crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch. Never had they seen battles like this. Zorknath's mandibles quivered with a mix of anger and grudging respect. "Final challenger," the general announced, his voice cutting through the din. "Krax the World Breaker." The arena floor split open, and a hulking figure rose from below. Krax was a cyborg monstrosity, more machine than alien, with arms that ended in whirring saw blades and plasma cannons, his single organic eye fixed on John with murderous intent. "Oh, come on," John muttered, still unsteady from the poison. "That's just not fair." Krax wasted no time with banter. He opened fire, peppering the arena with plasma bolts that left smoldering craters in their wake. John dove for cover, the searing heat of near misses singing his clothes. From the stands, Grakthor watched with newfound respect. "The human fights well," he said to no one in particular. Perhaps we underestimated his kind." Vexena, still recovering from the shock of her defeat, nodded in agreement. "There's something about him, a resilience I've never seen before." Down in the arena, John was in trouble. Krax's relentless assault had him pinned down, and the effects of the poison were taking their toll. But as he huddled behind a rapidly disintegrating rock formation, something caught his eye. A flaw in Krax's armor where organic flesh met machine. John took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. Then, in a move that could only be described as suicidal, he broke cover and charged straight at Krax. The cyborg, caught off guard by the reckless attack, hesitated for a crucial second. It was all John needed. He ducked under a saw blade arm, rolled to avoid a plasma blast, and then launched himself at Krax's weak point. John's fingers found purchase in the gap between flesh and metal. He pulled, tearing away protective plating to expose a tangle of wires and pulsing organic matter. Krax roared in pain and fury, trying to shake the human off. But John held on, his face a mask of grim determination as he ripped out handful after handful of vital components. Sparks flew, and acrid smoke filled the air. Krax's movements became erratic, his weapon systems misfiring. With one final, desperate heave, John tore out what looked like a central processor. Krax froze, his eye going dark, and then the massive cyborg toppled to the ground with an earth-shaking crash. Silence fell over the arena. John stood atop his fallen foe, chest heaving, covered in oil and blood, some of it his own. He looked up at General Zorknath, his eyes blazing with a fire that made even the hardened Phyrexian commander take a step back. "So," John called out, his voice carrying clearly despite his exhaustion, "do I pass your trial by fire?" Zorknath's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation, and though he'd never admit it, a touch of fear. This human had done the impossible, defeating 3 of his best warriors while poisoned and outgunned. The general realized, with a mixture of excitement and dread, that he had grossly underestimated humanity's potential. "You have proven yourself worthy, human," Zorknath announced, his voice carrying a note of respect that surprised even him. "Welcome to the Phyrexian Armada. May your enemies tremble before you." As the crowd erupted in cheers, John allowed himself a small, tired smile. Phase 1 of his mission was complete. Now, the real work could begin. The Zenith cruised through the inky void of space, its massive engines humming with barely contained power. In the weeks following John's spectacular trial by fire, an uneasy peace had settled over the ship. The human had been integrated into the crew, his strength and cunning earning him a grudging respect among the Vrexians. General Zorknath watched from the bridge as distant stars streaked by. His 4 eyes narrowed as he contemplated the human enigma. John had proven to be an asset in recent skirmishes, his unorthodox tactics often turning the tide of battle. But the general couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the human's presence than met the eye. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. The deck shuddered violently, throwing crew members off balance. Zorknath's mandibles clicked in agitation as he barked out orders. "Report. What in the 7 hells is happening?" A frantic technician's voice crackled over the comm. "Sir, it's the engines. They're failing across all decks. We're losing power fast." Zorknath's blood ran cold. Without engines, they were sitting ducks in enemy territory. How long until full shutdown? "Minutes, sir. Maybe less." The general's mind raced. This was no accident. It had to be sabotage. But who? His eyes darted to a nearby security feed, landing on a familiar figure racing towards the engine room. "John. Security teams to the engine deck." Zorknath roared. "Apprehend the human immediately." As chaos erupted on the bridge, John sprinted through the Zenith's winding corridors. He'd felt the ship's sudden lurch and knew time was running out. Whatever, or whoever, had caused this failure, he had to find a way to fix it before they all ended up as space debris. He skidded around a corner, nearly colliding with a squad of armed Vrexians. Their leader, recognizing John, raised his weapon. "Halt, human. By order of General Zorknath, you are to be detained." John didn't break stride. Instead, he accelerated, ducking under the first volley of stun blasts. In a fluid motion, he vaulted over the squad leader, using the alien's broad shoulders as a springboard. Before the Vrexians could react, John was already disappearing down the next corridor. "Sorry, guys," he called back. "No time to chat." The engine room was a scene of pandemonium. Alarms wailed, emergency lights bathed everything in an eerie red glow, and panicked technicians scrambled to contain the cascade of failures threatening to tear the ship apart. John pushed his way through the chaos, his eyes scanning for the source of the problem. That's when he saw it, a subtle distortion in the air near the main reactor core, something that shouldn't be there. "Everyone out," John shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "Clear the room now." The authority in his tone broke through the panic. Vrexian crew members began to evacuate, though some cast suspicious glances his way. As the last technician left, John approached the anomaly. "I know you're there," he said quietly. "Show yourself." The air shimmered, and a figure materialized. It was humanoid, but definitely not human. Its skin was a shifting patterns of stars and nebulae, as if a piece of the cosmos had taken form. "Clever," the being said, its voice like distant thunder. "I didn't expect anyone to notice me so quickly." John's mind raced. He recognized this species from classified briefings back on Earth. "You're a cosmic drifter. What are you doing here?" The being's starry eyes seemed to twinkle with amusement, causing a bit of mischief. "Your Vrexian friends have been poking their noses where they don't belong. Consider this a warning." John tensed, ready for a fight, but he knew engaging a cosmic drifter in physical combat was suicide. These beings could manipulate energy on a fundamental level. He needed another approach. "Look," John said, trying to keep his voice calm as the ship shuddered around them. "I get it. The Vrexians can be aggressive in their expansion. But there are thousands of innocent lives on this ship. Surely you don't want that kind of blood on your hands." The drifter tilted its head, considering. "And what do you propose, human? Why do you even care about these conquerors?" John took a deep breath. "Because right now, they're the only thing standing between my homeworld and total annihilation. Help me save this ship, and I promise to make the Vrexians understand the need for diplomacy." For a long moment, the engine room was silent save for the blaring alarms. Then the cosmic drifter nodded. "Very well, human. You intrigue me. Let us see if you can keep your word." With a gesture, the being sent a pulse of energy into the reactor core. Immediately, the alarms fell silent, and the comforting hum of the engines returned. "I've stabilized your systems," the drifter said. "But know this, we will be watching. If the Phyrexians continue their reckless expansion, next time there will be no warning." Before John could respond, the being shimmered and vanished. He was left alone in the now quiet engine room, his mind reeling from the encounter. The doors burst open, and General Zorknath stormed in, flanked by a squad of elite guards, their weapons trained on John. "You have 5 seconds to explain yourself, human," Zorknath growled, "before I have you space for sabotage and treason." John raised his hand slowly. "General, I know how this looks, but I swear to you, I just saved this ship and everyone on it." Zorknath's mandibles clicked skeptically. "A likely story. Our engines miraculously repair themselves, and I'm to believe you're responsible." "Not me," John said carefully. "We had a visitor, one that doesn't appreciate the Phyrexian Armada's recent activities." The general's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Now, over the next few minutes, John gave a carefully edited version of his encounter with the cosmic drifter. He emphasized the being's power and the warning it had delivered, while downplaying his own role in the negotiations. As he spoke, Zorknath's expression shifted from skepticism to concern, and finally to a grudging respect. "If what you say is true, human, then we owe you a debt. But this information is troubling. Cosmic drifters are not to be trifled with." John nodded, which is why I suggested a more diplomatic approach moving forward. "General, your people are strong, but there are forces out there beyond even Phyrexian might. Sometimes the path of conquest needs to give way to cooperation." Zorknath was silent for a long moment, his alien features unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "You continue to surprise me, John of Earth. Perhaps there is wisdom in your words, but do not think this means we will go soft. The Phyrexian Armada bows to no one." "Of course not," John said, allowing himself a small smile. "I wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise." As they left the engine room, alarm silenced and crisis averted, John felt a mix of relief and anticipation. He had passed another test, earned more trust. But the real challenge was yet to come. The cosmic drifter's appearance had changed things. The galaxy was taking notice of humanity's alliance with the Phyrexians. John's mission, to guide this powerful but reckless species towards a future that didn't end in Earth's destruction, had just become infinitely more complex. But as he walked alongside General Zorknath, discussing plans to fortify the ship against future incursions, John allowed himself a moment of hope. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. With cunning, determination, and a little cosmic intervention, perhaps they could forge a path to survival, and maybe even prosperity. In this vast and dangerous universe, the Zenith's engines hummed back to life, propelling them once more into the star-studded void. Whatever challenges lay ahead, John was ready to face them. For Earth, for humanity, and for a future among the stars. In the cycles following the engine room incident, an uneasy tension settled over the Zenith. John found himself walking a precarious tightrope between growing respect from the crew and deepening suspicion from General Zorknath. The human's uncanny ability to resolve crises had not gone unnoticed, and whispers of his true nature and intentions spread through the ship like wildfire. One particular evening, as John made his way through the less frequented corridors of the lower decks, he felt the unmistakable prickle of being watched. He rounded a corner to find Sub-Commander Vexkar waiting, her insectoid features unreadable. "The General requests your presence in his private chambers," she chittered, mandibles clicking with barely concealed agitation. John nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Lead the way, Sub-Commander." As they walked in silence, John's mind raced. He had known this moment would come eventually. The question was, had he done enough to secure his position, Or was Zorknath finally ready to eliminate the potential threat he represented? The general's chambers were a testament to Phyrexian opulence. Trophy skulls from 100 conquered species lined the walls, and holographic displays showed real-time battle statistics from across the galaxy. Zorknath stood with his back to the door, gazing out a viewport at the swirling nebula beyond. "Leave us," he growled to Vexkar, who bowed and retreated hastily. John stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back in a posture of relaxed attention. "You wanted to see me, General." Zorknath turned, his 4 eyes narrowing as they fixed on John. "Indeed, it seems we have much to discuss, human. Your actions aboard this ship have been most intriguing." "I hope I've been of service, sir," John replied carefully. The general's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or irritation. "Oh, you've been of service, certainly. The question is, to whom?" Before John could respond, Zorknath activated a holographic display. It showed footage from various points in John's time aboard the Zenith, his improbable victories in combat, his quick thinking during crisis, and most damningly, his conversation with the cosmic drifter in the engine room. "You see," Zorknath continued, his voice dangerously soft, "I've had our xenobiologists analyzing every scrap of data we have on your species, and do you know what they found?" John remained silent, his muscles tensing imperceptibly. "Nothing you've done should be possible for a human," Zorknath snarled. "Your strength, your reflexes, your resistance to toxins, it all exceeds known human capabilities by orders of magnitude. So tell me, John, what are you really?" The moment of truth had arrived. John took a deep breath, weighing his options. Lies would only dig him deeper. Perhaps a version of the truth was his best bet. "You're right, General," he said slowly. "I'm not an ordinary human. I'm part of a specialized program. We've been enhancing ourselves, preparing for the day we'd need to stand alongside species like yours." Zorknath's eyes widened slightly. Clearly, he hadn't expected such a direct admission. "Go on." John chose his next words carefully. "Humanity knew we were on a collision course with the rest of the galaxy. We needed to be ready. My mission was to integrate with your forces, to learn, to prove our worth as allies rather than conquests." The general's clawed hand tightened around the hilt of his ceremonial blade. "And you thought you could deceive the Phyrexian armada? That we would simply welcome you into our ranks without question?" "Not without question," John replied, allowing a hint of steel to enter his voice. "But with proof. Every challenge you've thrown at me, I've overcome. Every crisis, I've helped resolve. I came here to show you that humanity is not a species to be conquered, but one worthy of standing beside you." For a long moment, silence reigned in the chamber. John could practically see the gears turning in Zorknath's alien mind, weighing the potential benefits against the perceived betrayal. Finally, the general spoke. "A compelling tale, human. But how do I know this isn't simply another layer of deception? Perhaps you're an advanced scout, seeking our weaknesses before a full-scale human invasion." John allowed himself a wry smile. "General, if we had the capability to invade, do you think I'd be here alone? No. The truth is, we need you, and whether you want to admit it or not, you need us." Zorknath's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. "Bold words from one in your position. Give me one reason why I shouldn't space you right now." "Because of what's coming," John said quietly. "The cosmic drifter was just the beginning. There are threats out there that even the Phyrexian armada can't face alone. But together, we might stand a chance." The general's eyes narrowed. "What threats?" John opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment, the ship's alarms blared to life. The holographic displays flickered, showing a massive anomaly appearing off the Zenith's port bow. Zorknath whirled to face the viewport, his exoskeleton paling at the sight before them. A colossal tear in spacetime was forming, and through it poured ships unlike anything they'd ever seen. Organic and mechanical melded into nightmarish forms. "The amalgam," John breathed, his face grim. They're here. The general's head snapped back to John. You knew about this. We've encountered their scouts before, John explained quickly. That's why I'm here, why humanity has been preparing. The amalgam consumes entire civilizations, assimilating their technology and biology into their collective. They're not here to conquer, General. They're here to devour. As if to punctuate his words, the lead amalgam ship fired a sickly green beam that sliced through one of the Zenith's escort vessels like paper. The Vrexian ship didn't explode. Instead, its hull began to warp and twist, transforming into something alien and wrong. Zorknath's warrior instincts took over. He slammed a clawed hand onto the ship's comm system. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Prepare for imminent engagement. He turned back to John, his earlier suspicion replaced by grim determination. It seems, human, that your proof has arrived at an opportune moment. Can your enhancements help us against this threat? John nodded, already moving towards the door. They can, but more importantly, I have information on their weaknesses. If we work together, we might just have a chance. For a heartbeat, Zorknath hesitated. Then he made a decision that would alter the course of galactic history. Very well. You will join me on the bridge. Together, we will show these amalgam the true might of our combined strength. As they raced through the corridors, crew members scrambling to their posts around them, John allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The revelation of his true nature had come sooner than he planned, but the arrival of the amalgam changed everything. Now, humanity's fate was tied irrevocably to that of the Vrexians. The Zenith shuddered as another amalgam blast grazed its shields. John and Zorknath burst onto the bridge, an unlikely pair united against a common enemy. Orders, General. The weapons officer called out, her voice tense. Zorknath looked to John, who nodded and stepped forward. Target their propulsion systems with focused ion bursts, the human commanded. Their organic components are vulnerable to sudden radiation spikes. As the Vrexian crew rushed to comply, Zorknath placed a clawed hand on John's shoulder. When this is over, human, you and I will have much to discuss about the future of our alliance. John met the general's four-eyed gaze steadily. Agreed. But first, let's make sure we have a future to discuss. Together, they turned to face the viewport, where the amalgam fleet loomed like a nightmare given form. The true test of humanity's plan, and of John's mission, was about to begin. The battle raged across the star-studded void, a chaotic dance of energy beams, missiles, and writhing amalgam tendrils. The Zenith, once the pride of the Vrexian fleet, now bore the scars of intense combat. Its hull was pockmarked with impact craters, and entire sections had been sealed off due to decompression. On the bridge, John and General Zorknath stood side by side, a tableau of unlikely alliance. The humans' insights had proven invaluable, allowing the Vrexian forces to hold their own against the nightmarish amalgam ships. But the tide of battle was far from decided. Their flagship is changing formation, John called out, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. They're adapting to our attack pattern. Zorknath's mandibles clicked in frustration. Blast it all. Every time we gain an advantage, they shift and counter. It's as if they're learning from each engagement. John's expression darkened. That's because they are, General. The amalgam isn't just a fleet, it's a collective intelligence. Each ship, each drone, feeds information back to the whole. As if to underscore his point, a massive amalgam vessel suddenly split apart, its components reassembling into three smaller, more agile craft. These new ships immediately began targeting weak points in the Vrexian formation that hadn't existed moments before. Impossible, breathed Sub-Commander Vexkar, her compound eyes wide with disbelief. John shook his head grimly. Not impossible. This is what we've been preparing for. This is why humanity knew we couldn't face this threat alone. Zorknath turned to John, his alien features set in a mask of grim determination. You've proven your worth, human. But if your people have been preparing for this, Surely you must have more to offer than tactical advice. A ghost of a smile played across John's lips. I was wondering when you'd ask. He tapped a sequence into his wrist communicator, then looked up at the general. Sir, I recommend you order all Vrexian ships to fall back to minimum safe distance. Zorknath's eyes narrowed. And why, pray tell, would I do that? Because, John said softly, the cavalry is about to arrive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, space itself seemed to ripple and tear. A massive portal, far larger than the one that had heralded the amalgam's arrival, burst into existence. From its swirling depths emerged a sight that left even the battle-hardened Phyrexians speechless. Ships poured forth, sleek, organic-looking vessels that moved with impossible grace. But these were no amalgam craft. Each ship bore the unmistakable mark of human design, melded with technology that seemed to defy the laws of physics. By the seven hells, Zorknath breathed. What are they? John's voice swelled with pride. That, General, is the Earth Defense Fleet. Thousands of ships, crewed by enhanced humans like myself, armed with technology reverse-engineered from a dozen alien races. As they watched, the human fleet engaged the amalgam forces. Energy weapons lanced out, not just damaging the enemy ships, but unraveling the very bonds that held their hybrid forms together. Smaller craft darted between the lumbering amalgam vessels, planting devices that caused localized reality distortions, tearing the invaders apart from the inside. Magnificent, Vexcar whispered, her earlier suspicion replaced by awe. John nodded. Humanity has been fighting scout incursions from the amalgam for decades. We knew a full-scale invasion was coming. That's why we sent operatives like me to integrate with species like yours. We needed allies, but we had to prove ourselves worthy first. Zorknath turned to John, his four eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sign of intense emotion in Phyrexians. You could have simply asked for an alliance. Why the deception? Would you have believed us? John asked quietly. Would any species have taken a primitive race like humanity seriously if we'd simply shown up claiming to be the galaxy's saviors? No, we had to show our worth through action. The general was silent for a long moment, watching as the combined human and Phyrexian forces slowly but surely pushed back the amalgam fleet. Finally, he spoke. Your methods were dishonest, human, but I cannot argue with the results. What happens now? John's expression turned grave. Now, General, we finish this fight. And then we prepare for the real war. As if on cue, John's communicator chirped. He answered, and a holographic figure appeared above his wrist. A woman in an elaborate uniform, her bearing unmistakably that of a high-ranking officer. Admiral Chen, John said, snapping to attention. The woman nodded. At ease, Operative Walker. I see your mission was a success. Zorknath stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing John. I am General Zorknath of the Phyrexian Armada. Am I to understand that you are the leader of this human fleet? Admiral Chen met the alien's gaze without flinching. One of them, yes. General, on behalf of the United Earth Government, I extend our formal gratitude for your cooperation with Operative Walker. Your forces have fought bravely against a threat few were prepared to face. The Phyrexian general's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. And now that the deception is unveiled, what do you propose? An alliance, Chen said firmly. Not just between humans and Phyrexians, but a galactic coalition. The amalgam is not defeated. This was merely their first wave. We need every space-faring race united if we're to have any hope of survival. Zorknath was silent for a long moment, his alien mind no doubt wrestling with the implications of everything he'd learned. John held his breath, knowing that this moment could decide the fate of not just humanity, but countless species across the galaxy. Finally, the general spoke. Your methods were duplicitous, Admiral. In other circumstances, such actions might be considered an act of war against the Phyrexian Imperium. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the battlefield where human and Phyrexian ships now fought side by side. However, I cannot deny the truth before my eyes. You have the strength to be valuable allies, and the wisdom to seek cooperation over conquest. John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Years of preparation, of living a double life, had led to this moment. Admiral Chen nodded solemnly. We understand your reservations, General. Humanity is prepared to make amends for our deception. We offer full access to our technological advancements and our enhancement protocols. Together, we can forge a force capable of standing against the amalgam and any other threats our galaxy may face. Zorknath extended a clawed hand. Very well, Admiral. On behalf of the Phyrexian Imperium, I accept your proposal of alliance. May our combined strength shatter our enemies and usher in a new age of galactic prosperity. As human and Phyrexian clasped hands, or claw in hand, John allowed himself a moment of pure relief. His mission, improbable as it had seemed at the outset, was a success. Humanity had proven its worth and gained a powerful ally in the process. But even as the last amalgam ships retreated through rapidly collapsing portals, John knew this was only the beginning. The real war, a war for the very survival of all sentient life, was just beginning. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as protectors. As the Zenith's crew erupted in cheers of victory, John caught General Zorknath's eye. The Phyrexian gave him a nod of grudging respect, and John returned it with a tired smile. There would be challenges ahead, cultural misunderstandings, lingering suspicions, and the monumental task of uniting a fractious galaxy against an existential threat. But in that moment, watching human and Phyrexian ships flying in formation against the backdrop of a star-strewn galaxy, John allowed himself to hope. They had taken the first crucial step. Humanity was no longer alone in the cosmos. The future, uncertain as it was, looked brighter than ever.